All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at, and thank you for joining us for the Telerik Progress Telerik R3 2019 release webinar. My name is Sam Basu, and you are?
I'm Ed Charbeneau.
All right. So we are both dev advocates here at Progress Software, and we have a lot of things to cover over the next hour. We had a big release, so let's unpack and look at all the different things we can do to make developers more successful. Now, quick apology up front. I am dealing with or fighting a cold, and Ed's been trying to avoid me since yesterday, and it's ironic that he has to stand next to me for an hour now. But this is also your time, because we appreciate every one of you taking an hour out of your work, away from your families to be with us. So please ask questions. Hopefully we're going to show you some demos and walk through some things that we're excited about. Please ask questions. We have a small army of folks, as usual, who support us, our PMs, our engineering. They're all on the call. These are our social handles. If you need to catch Ed or me after the webinar, we are on Twitter, Skype, Twitch, everywhere. So thank you and welcome. So let's get rolling. First thing is some housekeeping and some logistics. We have a lot of things, as you know, in Telerik DevCraft, and it's unfair because our engineers put in a lot of time, and it's unfair for us to try to ram everything into an hour. Yeah. So we're actually doing an hour and a half and kind of breaking this up into two sections. This is the first half, and we're going to let Ed mostly talk about the web stuff. Then we're going to take a quick break, and then in the second half, I'm going to talk about mobile, desktop, and all of the other things like productivity and reporting. Okay. If you want to ask questions, there is a Q&A panel in the webinar software, so please go ahead and use that. If you want to just go out to Twitter and ask, that's perfectly fine, because it leaves a breadcrumb and we can answer questions. Everybody else can chime in. If you, for some reason, you have to run out and do some things, don't worry. We are recording this, everything, and we will put the recording up as soon as we can on YouTube, so you can relive the action. Okay, and use the hashtag #HeyTelerik on social media, so we can quickly get to the stuff that you're asking. So we are in the business of making UI for .NET, all things .NET. And again, .NET, I mean, this webinar in particular is about .NET. We'll talk about Kendo UI and JavaScript at a later time. And .NET is evolving, as we all know.
Quite a bit of things these days.
Right, so we have the .NET framework, we have Core, we have Mono, and everything is evolving because, again, it's more productivity, more options and flexibility for developers. Some of these are Microsoft slides that you have likely seen. We just had, as of last week, .NET Conf 2019, which was amazing. 3 days of non-stop streaming from the Microsoft studios. Our very own Ed was speaking.
Yeah, I got a chance.
Yeah, and everything is recorded. So if you're a .NET developer, I highly encourage you to go and check out some of the videos and the keynotes and the things that they talked about. We'll talk about some of those implications for us. But again, check out .NET Conf. So as we stand today, .NET is a couple of different BCLs. We have the framework, we have the .NET Core, we have Mono, we have Unity, and everything eventually is supposed to be merging next year.
.NET 5 is coming.
So this will be a unified platform for desktop, mobile, web, IoT, cloud, you name it, and AI and machine learning have a big place in .NET, and it's going to be nicer for developers. So there's a lot of work to get to this, but they're taking the best of .NET Core and Mono and just trying to put it all together into a single switchable runtime, but single .NET. Yeah, and I think this is exciting.
I think a lot of the churn will break down, and things will be a lot more stable when this happens. .NET Framework will go into kind of maintenance mode. Yep. So there won't be any confusion around that anymore. It'll be called .NET again. Right. No more .NET Core, .NET this, .NET that.
And as Scott Hunter, I think, shared at .NET Conf, you're going to see a steady cadence moving forward. It's going to be every year. And you can expect that, that stability from us as well, because we write .NET. So that's all the things with .NET. Again, we are here for the Progress Telerik side of the family, all the things that we can do for .NET developers across web, desktop, mobile, all these platforms to make you more productive, make you more successful. So that's what we're going to dive in today. And we obviously have Kendo UI, which Ed's going to talk, or maybe he's just going to touch upon it. But again, Kendo UI is all things JavaScript. But we started with the jQuery dependency, but now we make components for Angular, Vue, and React.
The Kendo UI library actually powers a lot of our .NET tools. So the AJAX and MVC components, they're using Kendo UI behind the scenes. And even our Blazor inherited, the HTML and the CSS styling and stuff from Kendo UI. So it's a nice, powerful platform to use everywhere.
Absolutely. All right, so that's what we're going to dive in. Now, a quick note, I guess, as we go into the release. So every release, like our PMs and our engineers, we sit down and we think about what is the right thing to do. And we always try to strike this balance. We obviously want to push the envelope. We want to do things that are future-facing, as with Blazor and Angular 8 and all that stuff. We also want to make sure that apps that have been running successfully are running fine moving forward. We'll talk about that with .NET Core 3 and modernizing the so-called legacy apps. But the other thing that I think sometimes we get into is, like, we do 3 major releases every year, and then we do service packs in between. And sometimes it feels like a rat race. We are just pushing and pushing. We are pushing out features and controls. I think I'm actually a little proud that this release, we took some time to step back and solidify the base that we stand on. So a lot of the controls that have been out, we have added features back. We have been very careful to look at requests coming in. If developers are having any issues, we want to make sure our docs are good to go. Our demos are as best as we could make. So again, we are trying to do all the right things this release, and it kind of close out the year nicely for R3. So, looking into the R3 release, this was a big release by all means. Like Ed will talk about some of the things for web. I'll talk about some of the mobile and desktop things. It's been a big release, lots of new things to show off. And it's, again, hard to show you everything in an hour and a half. So please check out blogs.telerik.com. So whatever you're using, be it WinForms or WPF or ASP.NET, every one of our teams will put out a blog to say what's new in this release. So go check that out, so that way you know what's new for your product. But hopefully this is a platform where we can share everything else we are doing across the board. So even if you're not using something, you can go ahead and kind of look forward to using that, because some of the features will be nice. Yeah. So blogs.telerik.com, that's where everything is documented. And obviously, get the hot bits. Again, everything that we show off today, you are not going to see it unless you have the R3 2019 bits. So however that is that you use it, be it straight up from Telerik.com, if you want to just download the DLLs and get the bits, if you use the control panels, or if you just want to pull things in from NuGet, however it is that you do it, go get the hot bits.
Don't forget about NPM too.
NPM, absolutely. So however it is that you do it, get the R3 2019 bits, and then you're going to see the things that we show you light up in your UI suites. Okay, so one last thing before we let Ed take it on is, we are developers. And if we are struggling, other developers will struggle as well, and we don't want that. So we put in a lot of effort to make sure that we can ease any pain developers might have. So this is something we don't talk a whole lot about, but again, our engineers and our teams put in a lot of work behind the docs to make sure they're absolutely good to go. So same with the demos and feedback. If you are having any issues, or if you want to see a new feature in your suites that you're using, go ahead and tell us, so we can put it through the queue and we can prioritize and try to get working on it.
There's a nice voting system in there too. So if you search and find something that you already see is up there and you want it, you can vote it up. And we do use that to plan our roadmaps and things.
Absolutely. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ed, because we want to talk about all things web and all things exciting. A lot of things happening across web forms, MVC, Razor, Blazor, you name it.
There is so much, and we've got about the next 35 minutes here to talk about the web. We've got a lot of bases to cover. We've got 4 generations of .NET to talk about. So I've got ASP.NET Web Forms, or AJAX as we call it. I've got ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Core and all those great things. So we've definitely got our work cut out for us. Before I get started, let me just talk about the upcoming Kendo UI webinar. We talked about Kendo UI powering a lot of the tools that I'm going to show you today, but if you're a JavaScript developer, make sure that you tune in next week on Tuesday, October 8th at 11 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time. Alyssa Nicole, Eric Bouchard, Carl will all be there. They'll all be presenting on the Angular, jQuery, React and Vue components that we offer. So they'll have their expert insights there. Today we're going to focus on .NET. And with .NET, we've got, like I said, almost 4 generations here. We've got MVC, AJAX, Core, and the brand new Blazor stuff that is absolutely hot. We've got brand new components for the Telerik UI for AJAX. And I'm going to demo the drawer component here in just a moment. We have this brand new drawer component. We have new functionality in our spreadsheets. And we've always been focused on accessibility with all of our components. And you'll see that theme throughout all of these updates, is that we're always improving accessibility. So with that said, I'm going to jump over to a quick demo with WebForms. So I've got a WebForms application. I'm going to give this a quick run. This is a standard template that we created that you can do file new project, and you get the Telerik UI components built right in. And it's pretty standard boilerplate stuff here. I want to add the new drawer component to this application. And what's nice about the drawer component is you can use it to wrap your application and have this nice responsive UI that flies out from the side, and we get a nice menu system. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my application. Now I've got this commented out so I can do it nice and quick here without you guys having to watch me type. So the first thing I'm going to add to my page is a script. This is a client-side script, and it's very, very simple. What I'm going to do is find our drawer component and just call the show API so it shows. We'll wire that up to a button in a moment. So I'm going to create a new rad drawer component, and I'm going to give it a content template. Now the content template is going to wrap the entire application that you just saw. So this is in my my master page. So I'm in master page.master here. This is going to wrap my entire application with this nice menu panel. So this is all of my application code, and I'm going to close out this content template. So in my content, after my content template, I have the menu items that I want to show. And these are templates as well, so I could put any type of UI in here that I'd like. I'm just going to list some boilerplate menu items here. And then we'll end that rad drawer, and that will complete our rad drawer component. Now on my page, I need some way to open this panel up. I could put this UI anywhere. I could use a nice hamburger button, something like that. I'm going to keep things easy and just add a rad button to the page. And I'm going to call that client-side script, that show drawer function that we added at the very top. The button just has a simple text of show text. Let's go ahead and run that application again, and we can see the brand new rad drawer component. Now this component also exists in MVC and ASP.NET Core, even as tag helpers. But this is an AJAX application here. Now if we click close, or sorry, show, we'll open up that new panel off the side of the screen. So I can click any of these items and it'll automatically close it back up. What's really neat is I can come back to my component. At the very top up here, there are different styles of how we can open up this off-screen panel. I'm going to change this to overlay. So hopefully I got that right there, and we should be able to see this different rendering mode. Ah, look at that. Instead of pushing the page out, we're going to render over the top of it that nice menu system. So we can put any type of UI components in here we want, and that's a nice, quick, intuitive interface for our users. So that is a brand new control for WebForms. So if we go to demos.telerik.com, you'll find all of the demos for ASP.NET and AJAX and Kendo UI. We've got tons of new stuff in here, which I'm going to be going over in detail in just a minute. But I wanted to pull up the AJAX page here and just show real quick. When you're on these demo pages, this is our new drawer component right here. If you notice, there's a little green tick next to it, and it says new. This is where you go find all the new great stuff that we've just released. So you can come in and find similar demos to the one that I just did. This is where I actually got the source code from to modify my application and add that piece to it. So you can come in and find all those code bits in here. So next up, we're going to go over to some ASP.NET MVC and Core. So we're going to switch modes a little bit from WebForms. And I'm going to talk about MVC and Core in the same context because we publish controls or components for the two platforms at the same time, and there's no difference between how the components are rendered. The only difference is with Core, you get the added bonus of tag helpers. So we've added a brand new timeline component, which I'll demo here in a minute, and a filter component as well. The filter component is really nice. As you'll see, you can add ad hoc filtering to your application as long as it's using a data source. We've got a rating component, cards. We've updated the PDF viewer. This is one of the components that our customers have reached out and shared a lot of interest in, so we've added some updates to that as well.
Same with mobile.
Same with mobile.
Yep.
I was going to say it's on Xamarin, isn't it?
Yep.
So we've got updates there. The grid keeps getting better. We've got an Omni search box that we can easily add to our application. I'll explain how that works. And once again, accessibility improvements. And a quick mention for ASP.NET Core here. We are supporting ASP.NET Core 3.0 now. So you can go ahead and get those bits and use them in your brand new ASP.NET Core applications. And once again, tag helpers are available. You'll see I'm going to build some stuff with tag helpers here in a moment. Let's go ahead and jump back into Visual Studio. I've got another project here in my solution. Let's start with ASP.NET MVC. So I'm just going to set that as my startup project here. And we will drop into the index page. So I'm going to go to my home view page here. And once again, I've got some code commented out so I can make this nice and quick for my demo. We'll go ahead and give this a run and see what we've got to start with. We'll do a little tab bankruptcy while we're at it. We'll close all those other tabs out. So I've got the standard grid here. You can do File New Project and choose the Telerik grid starting template, and you can get this similar application here. What I'd like to do is demo the brand new search box that we have. So I'm going to add a search box to the toolbar. With just a few lines of code, we're going to add that search box. And I've got those commented out here. So this is my data grid that I'm describing with our Fluent API for our Kendo component. I've defined my columns, and I also have a data source down here. I've kept the data source detached from the grid itself because I want to do a little bit more with that in a minute. You'll see how that plays in, but all my data comes in through my data source, and we're going to add a new toolbar item here. So I'll uncomment this, and I'll explain exactly what that does. My screen real estate is a little small here due to the streaming platform. Let me get these quotes or comments out of the way. There we go. So I've added a toolbar. So I've got a brand new toolbar here, and inside of my toolbar, I've lost the ability to interact with my Visual Studio. Visual Studio doesn't want to play along. All right, so I've got my toolbar. I've added search to my toolbar. In my search configuration, I'm telling the search box which columns that I want to search on. So I can configure this to search on one or many columns in my data sets. We're going to go ahead and run this again. And we'll see we've got that same page. But this time, in my toolbar, up in the right-hand corner, I've got this nice search box. So in here, I can type in anything that might show up in those two columns. For example, I could say filter by USA, and that automatically picks up those changes. I can also type in 40, and it's queuing off of the ship name of 40 in here. So you can see how quick that, that grid refreshed. Now, what's nice is it's doing an AJAX call. It's going back to our controller, and I'll show you how that search actually gets translated into something our application can use. So on my controller, I have a grid controller, and you'll see it accepts a parameter of data source request. Now that data source request has everything it needs to know about the grid. What page is it on? What filter is it using? Is it grouping? All of those things are bundled up inside of that data source request for you. So you don't have to worry about these things. That also powers all of the filtering and paging that's on the grid, as well as the search. So the next thing we need to do is take our data set and apply this to data source result and pass in that request. So when we put something in that search box, it gets brought up in this request object. And then we can filter our data source by calling to request on that data source. This could be an entity framework data set or just an IEnumerable. And then we pass that result back to the system as JSON. and our component on the front end picks it up and renders that new data out. So we'll see that data source request used again here in just a minute. So I want to come in and add another new component that we have. So I'm going to come up to the top here. I'm going to uncomment some code here again. And I have the brand new filtering component. So let's go run the application again. I'll explain what that code is I just added. That piece of code I'll walk through in a moment, but what we did is we added this nice filtering mechanism to our application. So I can come up here and say and filter by, and notice I have order date in here. So I've got some configured columns in here. This is customizable.
I love the UI.
It's very nice. Everything is nicely animated. It's very intuitive. It's contextually aware, so it sees that I have an order date, and it's providing me a date picker. So I'll choose next week. I'll say if it's after next week, I can hit apply, and you'll see that the data grid updated. Not only did it update, but even the filtering mechanisms that are in the grid updated as well. So you get that filter copied into that column. So I can come in there and I can add ands and ors. And for example, I could say, give me by country. I can say Bulgaria. I can hit apply, and now I've got another search added, filter added to that. And you notice the filter is actually lighting up on the column as well. So these things are all one part of a cohesive system. So if I go back into my code, we can see how that's configured. So first of all, I've got I'm telling it to go ahead and display an apply button. So it's not doing this as we're entering the information out, but we can actually submit what we want to show up in the filter. And then I just add the fields that exist in my data source. So this is where I can highly configure what shows up there and exclude columns that maybe I don't want showing up in that filter system. What's nice about this is it can work outside of the grid. It's working against the data source itself. As long as we are sending back to the controller the data source request object, we can put this on any data source collection and display the data however we'd like. It could be in a list format. It could be cards. Speaking of cards, that's another new component that we offer in this release. So I'm going to go to demos.telerik.com again, and notice all the green lights inside of the page here. So if we zoom in, we've got the new filter is here, the grid updates, we've got a brand new diagram component, we've got the cards that I was talking about. So in that filtering, with that filtering component, we could add the ability to filter a stack of cards, like this, for example. We could add a filter here. And the cards themselves are robust. We've got a drag and drop API that's built in and everything.
Nice.
So there's lots and lots of updates. There's too many to cover in the webinar. There's just so much that we've added to ASP.NET Core and MVC. The diagram component is very detailed. It lets you do all sorts of diagramming of hierarchies. These things are interactive. We can click and drag them around and create on a design surface. We can export to PDF and all sorts of things.
Cool.
So it's a nice, rich API there. There's too much to cover in ASP.NET Core. I want to go over to MVC actually, or sorry, there's too much to cover in MVC. I want to go over to Core for a minute and do a quick demo here. And this demo also applies to MVC, but I wanted to do something with tag helpers to show that next generation of components for .NET Core. So I'm going to go over to ASP.NET Core now. And I've got a similar application here. We'll go ahead and run this one. And instead of a grid this time, I'm going to show off a brand new component that we have for all of the MVC and Core frameworks, the new timeline control.
So this was heavily requested.
This is heavily requested. One of our fellow developer advocates made like a proof of concept using Kendo UI. So this is in Kendo UI, ASP.NET Core, and MVC. It comes as a HTML helper or a tag helper. I'll show you the tag helper code behind this in just a moment. But it's nice, we can click through the different tabs here. We also have an extended timeline that we can advance back and forth through. If we go into our code, we can take a look at how that is implemented. Let's get the right code up here. We need to dive into our pages. This is a Razor Pages project. So we're compatible with Razor Pages, Razor Views, regular JavaScript and HTML if you'd like. But for .NET, we've got HTML helpers and tag helpers too. So this is a Kendo timeline tag helper. You notice it looks a lot like HTML. We could write this in the HTML helper syntax or like this. This syntax is very nice. It resembles HTML. It's
very readable.
Yeah, it's very readable. It uses tags and attributes just like HTML does, so it blends in with your code nicely. There's not a lot of context switching between the two. So we've got our timeline. We can set an orientation, and then we describe the data schema. So we've got a date field, the title, all of the attributes that you see on the timeline. We bind those to something concrete inside of an object. That object I've actually put here in the code behind, so we could take a look and see what that looks like. And it's very simple. It's a POCO object, as we like to call them. It's just a bunch of properties that we can model our data to. So we're going to create some data up here, add some new items to the list. This could come from a database. It could come from a web API source. We're just going to map this data to those plain class objects. And then our component picks up those objects, and we read those through a controller action, or in the case of Razor Pages, from our code behind. So I'm going to get those events, and then I'm going to apply those to the timeline. We also have other rendering options in here. So I can come up to my configuration here. I can say orientation is currently horizontal. We saw that. We had the two buttons on the outside that let us pan back and forth. I'm going to hit Control J here. I've got some IntelliSense that says, oh, I've got a vertical orientation as well. We'll go ahead and change that. I'll save it, and we'll rerun the application. We'll get a whole different view of that timeline.
If you're maybe building a PWA for mobile, vertical may be the way to go.
Yeah, vertical might be a little more mobile friendly, and we can toggle between these two types of views real easily. Nice. And now that view scans down the page instead of across. Yep. And the interactivity is much different between the two. Your real estate changes. So with a vertical or a horizontal orientation, we have those buttons that you can click through because the web isn't inherently horizontal, right? You're vertical scrolling with the web mostly. So we change up the UI based on that horizontal behavior. And then when we have the vertical layout, things are just naturally fluid with the web, and we can scroll up and down through that timeline. These things also have action buttons that can be configured, so we can jump out to web pages in the case of this demo. And once again, this demo is on demos.telerik.com. I've just pared it down so I can show you some of the detailed code here on the webinar. So next up, we're going to talk about one of my favorites.
The thing that you don't stop talking about.
Hey, I covered WinForms, MVC, Razor tag helpers, all the things. But now I'm going to focus on Blazor. This is where I've been having a lot of fun lately, is the Blazor framework. It is an amazing framework that Microsoft just released last week at .NET Conf. So it is officially out. It is in ASP.NET Core 3.0. The officially supported platform is currently server-side. So this application runs server-side, but it still lets you build a client-side SPA application without using the J word, JavaScript. Don't have anything against JavaScript. It powers all sorts of things in our library of tools, from Kendo UI to NativeScript. So I don't have anything against JavaScript, but if you want to focus on .NET and be in your .NET tools and language.
Because, I mean, a lot of enterprises, I mean, if you are traditionally a .NET shop, you have almost had to go into Angular, React, or Vue land just to build a SPA. Now you can do .NET front and back.
And there's a potential for code sharing between Xamarin and the web. So there's some really interesting aspects to it. Now, we did a webinar last week on September 26th that talked all about the basics of the Blazor framework and how to get started. So if you're new to Blazor, this is the first time you're hearing about it, and you feel like you don't understand exactly what these new components are being used for, go check that webinar out. It is available. The recording is up online. If you go to telerik.com/webinars, just scroll down a little bit and you'll find Adopting Blazor, and there's a button to click and watch that video. So you can watch that already recorded webinar there. So Telerik UI for Blazor. Blazor just came out last week, and we've already got 25 brand new natively written controls for the platform. I'll show you some of those components in just a second. It is shipping with support for ASP.NET Core 3.0. And then once again, you can build full stack .NET apps without writing a single line of JavaScript.
And this is a big deal. Like, I mean, we shipped Blazor before Microsoft shipped Blazor, like our UI. And I mean, everything, like, I mean, as Ed would say, everything is built from scratch. So we are performance tuning it, and we're doing as optimized a rendering as we can.
Yeah, we decided to get on Blazor very early on. And we've been very happy with how the framework is for developers. It's very intuitive. Our engineers enjoy working with it very much. So we've got a lot of new components as a result of their hard work. And one of our most popular controls, obviously, is the grid component. Everybody loves the grid. We'll dive into the grid here in just a second. We've got drop downs, we've got charts, we've even got a pop-up window component, so you can do dialogues and all of those things. We have this amazing thing called the animation container, which is one of my favorite things because it lets me be very creative, and I can create all sorts of little widgets that can pop in and out of existence inside of the DOM, and I don't have to write any fancy JavaScript or CSS animations. It's all canned and ready to go for me. I've had some fun with that one. But you can see we have a similar method of finding what's brand new in the suite. If you go down the right-hand side or left-hand side here, you'll see these updates. We have new chart components. We just released our bubble chart. We'll focus on that one for a minute because I'm going to show a demo with the bubble chart here in a minute. So we have the brand new bubble chart component. Where we can bind the data and show the different size bubbles based on what type of action that's occurred with that data point. We have a scatter chart, line chart. These are all brand new, just added in this latest release. And then, of course, we have the good old sturdy bar charts, pie charts, and all of those things. Those have been there for quite a while now. In the grid, we have this brand new concept of a hierarchy. In our example here, and this is something I'm going to demo in just a minute, we have this ability to go into the grid, and we can open it up and drill down into yet another grid of data.
Sure.
So this is super useful. This is something highly requested. What's awesome about Blazor, though, is this isn't something that is a black box that we can't get inside of and make changes to. So this is actually being powered by a templated region, and we'll go ahead and demo that. So I'm going to pull up another solution here. Let's close this one out.
While you're doing that, it's funny, like your Visual Studio, like I'm the Apple guy. I should be all in on dark mode with iOS or macOS, but you're the one who's using dark mode on Visual Studio.
Don't short sell my dark mode. This is a 100% custom theme, which you can get in the Visual Studio Marketplace. So go to Visual Studio Marketplace, search for Mid-Century, and there's my theme that I created with the brand new theme tools that they've added to Visual Studio. This is my Blazor application. It is the identical Blazor demo application that we just saw running in the browser. Now, I've got that hierarchical grid that is running in that browser, that demo we just saw in the browser. And I'm going to reopen it because it looked like the Visual Studio tooling was giving me some red flags that weren't true. So some false positives there. I've got my Telerik grid. I'm binding to some data. And notice after my grid columns are defined, I have a detail template. Now the detail template here is really important because this is where the second grid exists. So I have a data grid with in it another data grid. So like I said, this isn't a black box. It's not a special version of the grid that has this hierarchy built in that you can't get into and work with. This is a detail template that I can control myself and do whatever I'd like with. So why don't we take out this data grid? So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. So that detail template is now empty, and I can do whatever I'd like with it. Let's go back to the demo here, because that bubble chart looked really cool, didn't it? Let's put that inside of the hierarchical grid instead of another grid. So when we drill down, we get a bubble chart. I already have one that displays on that page, and what's nice about Blazor is every component is also a page, and pages are components. So I can actually go into my detail template and say, I already have a thing, let's go find that thing. I'm just going to type in bubble here, and IntelliSense is going to say, hey, you have a component named, it's got kind of a long namespace here. That's just because it's telling me where it exists in the assembly. You can use using statements to shorten this up, but for all intents and purposes, it says in my demo pages, I have a chart component called bubble chart. So I've just stuck that in my detail template. Let's go ahead and rerun this. So this is the demo application. If you're doing the Telerik control panel to install your component or your tooling, you can check a box that says install local demos, and you will get this demo on disk. So you can run it locally and hack away at it just like I did. That's what it's there for. It's there to learn and beat it up and tear it apart and put it back together. So I've got my hierarchy view here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So far it looks the same, but now I'm going to drill in.
Fancy.
Now I've got a bubble chart there. And that has how many lines of code? It was one. Yeah. One line of code. I reused something that already exists. And that goes for not only pages, but I could put any raw component in there with its own logic. I can tie it into the data on that grid row. So each time the grid renders a row, you get access to that object that was bound there. So I have full access to, say, the ID of the parent object that's there. So I can take the ID, bind it to some new data, and populate that chart based on the current row that I'm on. Very easy stuff to do, very low code. Blazor is extremely efficient.
Yeah.
So that is all of my demos for everything that is new for the web.
So the web it's changed a lot. And like if you are just doing ASP.NET, I mean, you have so many options now. If you're doing web forms, I mean, you can happily keep doing web forms. If you are doing MVCs, same with Razor pages, you can happily keep on doing that. If you want to be on the bleeding edge, Blazor is here to stay. And Blazor is not just for the web. I think at .NET-Conf they were showing off, like moving into next year, we might see, like it already does server-side, so we might see some of it in an Electron shell powering a desktop application.
Yep, we're going to see it on WebAssembly running all client-side, 100% client-side. All of our components work client-side. Client-side's still in preview, but it doesn't mean you can't use our components with it. You could take that demo, run it client-side, it would work just fine. It includes all the templating features and everything. The code for your application doesn't change. The only thing that changes is how you access your data, because you're going from a disconnected environment to one where you're on the server. So those things will change. The component architecture does not. So
that's
how you're rendering grids and binding the data.
I mean, it's got pros and cons, right? I mean, if you're doing server-side, then you have to have that signal-out connection back and forth. But if you are going all in with WebAssembly, then you are shipping more to the client side.
Yeah, we talk about some of those things on the previous webinar. So if you haven't got a chance, again, go to telerik.com/webinars. And some of the stuff Sam was talking about, we covered there.
Yeah, perfect. One question we might be able to answer. Laurie Dickinson was asking if the drawer tag helper supports like expand on open programmatically.
There are APIs to customize that however you'd like. You could put a small piece of script in there that says on page load, go ahead and open that up. I don't know if that's built in out of the box, but there is quite a bit of API surface there.
Sure. But I mean, thank you for asking it publicly, because then Ed can get back and we can find out exactly how to do that. All right, so that was a lot of stuff for web.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which you finished on
So
time.
4.5 generations of .NET. I mean, AJAX, web forms, tag helpers, HTML helpers, .NET Core, and Blazor.
Yeah, so I think the bottom line is, however you're building web apps today, we are here to help you. You should not be, we should not be holding back your hands. Use any framework that you want. And we talked about only the .NET side of the family today, but there is Angular, there is React and Vue. So bring in whatever framework you want on ASP.NET Stack, build it however you want, and you should be able to render our UI from however it is that you're building.
Yeah, if you want to see like all of the things web that we actually do, go to themebuilder.telerik.com, and you can skin any of our components however you'd like. And if you just look at this product selection, you can see we cover all of our bases. If there's a framework, we've got something for it.
So we have wrappers for like PHP and JSP, and I actually really like the theme builder because it lets you see exactly how the components look like, and then you get to download a CSS or a LESS or a SAS file.
Yeah, and what's nice about the theme builder, and not many people probably know this, but the type of application you choose to theme is actually running inside of this panel on the lower right-hand side. So where it says theme preview, whatever type you chose, I chose Blazor. This is actually a Blazor application that is loaded here.
Nice.
So you're seeing what you see is what you get. Like when you come over here and select a theme, this is exactly how your theme will look when you download it and put it in your application, because that is a Blazor application right there, or it is an Angular application running in that frame.
All right, nice, nice. All right, so I think that's all with the web. Ed's not going to say the S word, but I might say it. Silverlight, that's still around.
What's a
And
Silverlight?
I mean, again, if you're building apps with Silverlight, we give you a UI suite for Silverlight. It's going strong. Everything that you see for like jQuery, we make sure to put the love back in Silverlight. But yes, you should be looking to see what else you can do with it, how you can modernize it. Maybe Blazor is an option. And this goes for any ASP.NET application in particular. Like if you want to move things forward, the first step is to abstract away as much of your business logic as you can into reusable things, C#, or make it a .NET standard library. Then you won't care as much about the UI framework that you're using. All right, welcome back to part 2. We covered a lot of things for web, ASP.NET. Let's look into all of the other things you can do with the Telerik DevCraft suite, because again, we want to empower developers to build all of the other things that you do. Let's start with mobile, because that's the big thing. Everybody has a smartphone nowadays. So how can we enable developers to build for mobile? And we're going to dive into Xamarin first. But again, it's good to kind of appreciate that there is no one way of doing mobile nowadays. There are a lot of options. And again, if you are doing JavaScript, then we make open source frameworks like NativeScript, which will help you code share better with your web components or any Spot frameworks that you're bringing in. There are other things like Flutter that we are actually looking into. There are things like Uno platform. We're looking into all of those things because we want to enable developers to build apps however they want. But again, for the majority of C# and .NET developers, the ship has kind of sailed with Xamarin, because this is the easiest way for us to be able to take our .NET code and make it truly native cross-platform apps for iOS, Android, and a lot more things. So some of these slides are from the .NET Conf, and you can see the promise of Xamarin. It's fundamentally iOS and Android with C# and .NET. All of the APIs that are native to the platform are exposed to you, and you're building truly native apps. I've always appreciated how the Xamarin folks define what is native. It is native UI, native performance, and just native access to all of the APIs. As long as you're doing that, you're building a native app. And everything is free and open source, so there is no barrier to entry. Now, there are a couple of different ways in which you can build Xamarin apps. This is where we started, the traditional UI approach, which is also called Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android. And it's still a legit solution for lots of line of business apps in particular, where you're building a shared C# business logic layer, but you're building the heads natively for iOS iOS, Android, and Windows. And again, that works. But a lot of C# developers favor Xamarin Forms because this is where you can really reuse a lot of your code. You can not just have C# that is shared, but also UI code. And it's difficult to share UI between 3 different platforms.
Very difficult.
But we are trying, and everybody is trying to do the same things and build better UI that's abstracted. Now at .NET Conf, there are a couple of different things announced. And again, we are working closely with Microsoft on every one of these things because we want developers to be productive. And it's not just Xamarin, like Flutter and NativeScript and everybody else tries to always tighten up the dev loop. Because mobile is hard. You have multiple SDKs, you have simulators and emulators going on, maybe you're deploying to your device. The thing that we want to tighten up is when you make a code change and you hit F5, we want that code change to show up on your simulators, on your device, as quickly as possible. So there are a couple of things Xamarin announced. Xamarin Hot Reload. This was in fact announced a couple of months back, and then they made it formal at .NET Conf. In fact, Maddie Legger, who's one of our friends, she's a PM on Xamarin Forms team and some of the tooling team. She in fact used one of our apps to show off Xamarin Hot Reload working. So absolutely, our stuff works with Hot Reload. But this is when you're actually editing just a piece of the UI. If you're actually changing code files, that's different because we do have to compile. But even for that, there is a thing called hot restart. So you don't have to compile the whole application. You can just do a little bit of it and push it off to your device. So that's still in beta. And again, we are working very closely with Microsoft to make sure we are keeping you as productive as possible.
I focus on the web, and I don't do any mobile, but I saw that presentation. I was extremely impressed.
Yeah, yep. Things have come a long way. So let's talk about Telerik UI for Xamarin. This is something I'm passionate about because I spent quite a bit of time on this. Our UI for Xamarin suite is meant to be the best possible UI that Xamarin developers can have. It's meant for Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, Xamarin Forms, works on every Visual Studio, Mac or Windows. There are multiple ways in which you can get started or get the bits. You can just pull in some DLLs, or the easiest way is to go to NuGet and get the bits. We try to giving you a lot of things to get started with from a good starting point. There are some really nice templates. There are some common screens that a lot of mobile apps use, like a login screen or like a drawer control, the master detail page. All of those things are nicely templated out, so you can use it. And you don't have to take my word. Go ahead and use these apps. There's a sample app in iOS, Android, and Windows. So go ahead and use these apps and see how our UI actually works. So let's talk about some of the things that are new in Telerik UI for Xamarin for R3. We have been pushing on this front for quite a bit, and we'll talk about this kind of from a holistic standpoint, but we put in a lot of effort behind document processing. Because turns out if you're building line of business apps, you do care about Excel and Word and PDF. Those are important for your users.
Very.
So we put in a whole word processing library. We did PDF last time, and this is very powerful. It runs on .NET Standard, so you can include that inside of your Xamarin apps. You can do it on server, or you can also do it entirely client-side. It's meant for flow documents, and it has multiple formats that you can support, like docx for Word, also RTF, HTML, or plain text. You have access to a lot of APIs, so you can build those docs exactly the way you want. And the DOM of the doc, this is not the HTML DOM, this is the Word doc DOM. It is very, very powerful. You can just put anything you can think of in a Word document. Paragraphs, complicated tables, and hierarchy, lists, different types of styles and formatting, everything is supported. Bookmarks, watermarks, you name it. And it is performance tuned, so we did some testing to make sure we can handle big amounts of data. So it's going to be a really long flow document, and you can also export this out to other formats like PDF. So
I've done a lot of financial work, and what is the first thing any CFO says when you hand them the brand new app?
Yeah.
How do I get it off the screen and onto paper?
Yeah. So we actually do support printing, so we'll talk about that as well. So again, all of this is set up for you to create, modify, and use these flow documents in your Xamarin apps. Next up is calendar. We put a lot of love and care in the calendar because it's really helpful. It is really difficult to build a native iOS or an Android. So scheduling enhancements. So we have some scheduling things that we did. You can mark spots in your calendar that are special, or you can mark spots that are restricted so nobody can create a meeting on top of it, and you can customize the look and feel of it. You can do it through APIs, or you can do it in XAML. You can actually scroll the calendar to a certain part of the view, so you can draw attention to what the user is looking at. And then we give you like data template selectors, so you can do it across, like you're just writing XAML, and it works on iOS and Android. So a lot of love has gone into the calendar view for Xamarin. Moving on to the PDF viewer. This is something we actually did last release, but we kept on pouring some more love into it. So again, it's a PDF viewer, but it actually has the entire PDF processing built into it. So you can, it's a .NET Standard library. You can build PDFs on the fly, on the server or on the client, and it's meant for an easy visibility. So single page, continuous scrolling, and it has all of the things that you can think of that a PDF might have. Tables and images and bullets and shapes and lists, all of that. It's very performant, and it can be used standalone, or you can build it through an API. Now, what's new in this release is if you have a PDF, again, your CFO might want to copy a piece of text out of his mobile phone and want that somewhere else. So you can now do it over mouse and keyboard, obviously, if you're doing it on a simulator, but also on a mobile app, you can touch and kind of drag, and then you can select a piece of text. We put it in your clipboard, and then you can copy it out to anywhere else you want. If you're using any links, we can annotate them. We can take you to a specific part of another document if need be. And we also raise events as people are tapping on links, so you don't inadvertently go out of the app. So
nice.
All of these things are kind of now built into the PDF viewer. The image editor. So again, this is the new hotness. We did much of this work in the last release, but this is where you can actually edit images on the fly in your app. And again, there are lots of uses of an image editor that people might want to.
Sam, you love selfies. So.
So if you're taking picture, you can give your users a lot of the control back as to how they edit pictures and how they save it and all that. So what they did this release was a lot of performance tuning, and we also have some new options for you. So you can crop. So you can make it an oval. This is especially true for if you're making like a profile picture. You can crop it exactly the way you want, oval, circle, or square. And then we maintain the aspect ratio once you're editing it, and then we give you multiple ways of saving it. So you're not, like there are some apps or some websites which might have a specific like resolution that they're looking for. And as you save, you don't want to lose that resolution. We want to still that or have that same image size maintained. So we do all of that for you now in the image editor. Yep. So moving ahead, let's go take a look at some of this Xamarin stuff. So I'm going to pull up Visual Studio here. And what I'm showing you here is if I head out to Telerik.com, and if I look at, let me pull up Visual Studio here. If I look at the Xamarin product page, you can hit this big download free trial button, and essentially what you get are the bits for Telerik UI for Xamarin in a trial mode, and you also get the bits for a couple of applications. And this is actually the app that we put it in the store. So I'm showing you the app that you can actually play around with once you install the app on your phone. So this one here is just a simple Xamarin Forms application. You can see that I have a shared repository, and I have platform-specific projects for iOS and Android. My zooming doesn't work as well as on Windows, so Ed has a winning hand this time. Mac zooming doesn't quite scale as good. So, but let me show you this app in action. So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and run this thing. So this is the sample app that I talked about. This is in the iOS and Android store, so you can play with it. And I'm going to launch it so you can kind of see how the times work, how quick things are. But this is just the iOS simulator taking its time to boot up for the first time.
The emulators come a long way.
Yes, they have.
With Xamarin. Like I said, I don't do this daily, but I do check in every once in a while.
And it's not just Xamarin,
really
it's iOS and it's Android. And everybody has poured in more and more love to make sure things are fast as they can be. So this, as you can see, this is actually running iPhone 11. You can do iPhone 11 Max as well, and it's running iOS 13. So we support the latest and greatest bits for iOS and Android. So I'm showing you the iOS app, but you can do the exact same thing for Android. So this is the app that you can actually play with in the stores. Just look for Telerik, and you can find this app. So let me show you a couple of things. So first is, let me show you just a quick simple thing here. This one here is a barcode. And what it's showing you is a little a barcode that lets you have access to your getting on a plane. This is your boarding pass. So while I have this on and running, this is Mr. Ed's boarding pass. So I don't want him to get on a plane. I would rather take his seat. So let me see if I can find this here. That's him. This is just kind of hard-coded. So watch this here. I can just change anything in my XAML. I can change colors. I can change names. All I have to do is save, and it's picked it up.
I'm pretty sure that's how your favorite airline does things behind the scenes.
Yeah. So this is Xamarin Hot Reload, okay? And everything that you see with Xamarin works on top of what we build as well. So everything that you have in Telerik UI for Xamarin, all of the XAML that you use in our UI, you can edit all of them on the fly, and then you can see those changes as quickly as possible. The moment you save the file, it's updated. It's kind of like what Webpack does for mobile apps, except we can be a little more smarter because we are building truly native apps. So that's Xamarin Hot Reload working. Now let me go back in here and show you just a couple of things here. So if I look at the word processing things again, play around with this, you'll see that in this quick demo, you can actually create a Word document. You can include headers and footers, and then you can go ahead and generate that. We use some APIs to generate or build the Word doc in the fly on memory, and then you can use it however you want. If I show you like an export feature here, this one is taking a docx and it's converting it to a PDF. So let me go ahead and export here. It's going to say I'm done, and at this point you can share this however you want. And here is Ed's favorite print thing, because the CFO might want to print.
They always want to print. It never fails.
Yep. So this is pure native PDF that you can print from your app. So that's really nice. Moving ahead at some of the other things that I talked about, this is the image editor. And we did this last release where you can really pick any image, and we give you all of these things to kind of work with. You can control the brightness, you can crop things as you want, and you can save it in whatever res that you want. But the new thing here is if I go into here, this is a custom toolbar that I can present. I can edit a profile picture here, and notice when I hit this, I get different things to play around with. This is kind of doing a circular shape. I can do an oval, I can do a square, and then I get to save this off as my profile picture. So just a few more cropping things that you can use, and these are always nice. So let me see. I think that's most of the demos that I want. One thing that I don't get to show off a whole lot is, and I won't go into the details, but I highly encourage mobile developers to check this out because this is so sweet. We did a thing with mapping, and it's not mapping like the way you think mapping. This is truly using like open standards, so we can build things like rooms in a hotel, or seats at a stadium, or like a very interactive map of a country or the world. So these are things we put in a lot of work and love behind, so we are hoping you can try things out. So just a quick look at some of the things I showed you. Hopefully the text is big enough to read. So this one here is the word processing thing. So essentially when you tap on the generate thing, this is it's using a command, and then essentially it comes down here. And take a look at this piece of code here. That's the RAD flow document. That is exactly what you're building. And we can take any format that you want, and it's a memory stream that we're grabbing. You can build it in code however it is that you want. And we get to export that out. So going back to the cropping demo that I showed you, there's a little bit of geometry we are using here just to make sure we are sticking to the aspect ratios. So when you hit the crop button, we are using a little bit of geometry. And essentially what it comes down to here is a little bit of XAML. And the custom toolbar, essentially when you hit that button, what I did with the changing the profile pic, it raises a command, and then we come down to changing the view, which is here. That's the open command, and then in here you'll see that we are picking up a navigation service, going into that, and then the view model comes in and says, okay, what exactly do you want to do? The square, the oval, the circle, it's all in here, and we are controlling the radius and the rectangle and moving things around, so you can crop exactly the image from that stream, and then we get to save it off, right? So again, a lot of love in the Xamarin suites. I think Xamarin has come a long, long way in terms of how convenient it is and how painless it is for .NET developers to build truly native cross-platform apps. So give Xamarin a try, give our UI a try. I think you'll come out really impressed. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop this so my iOS simulator isn't running. And let's go back and switch gears to some of the other things. Ed, let me know if you see any questions pop by. Let's talk about desktop, right? And this is where I always feel like when we go to conferences for software developers, everybody keeps referring to desktop as legacy. And that hurts. That's got to be hurting because that's what is running your enterprise business. This is not legacy. It's your everyday real world. So thankfully, Microsoft is pouring in some love as well. And we are on board trying to make sure you can modernize and add all of the features that you want in your desktop applications. So again, going back to .NET Conf, .NET Core 3 landed officially at .NET Conf, and again, lots of goodness. We knew this coming into .NET Conf. We have been working with Microsoft for months and months now. So WPF, Windows Form, it's all happy to run on .NET Core 3 on the desktop, and you can have side-by-side installs. You can have multiple versions of .NET running, which is all great news. And WPF and WinForms are also open source. So again, no barrier to entry whatsoever. Along with it is C# 8 that landed. So again, all of that is welcome if you want to use it with any of our UI, because the UI rendering is separate. One thing that is kind of interesting is we always had Visual Studio App Center, which is something I'm very fond of, because if you're building things where you need to distribute within your enterprise, or if you want to get like crash analytics, you want to do push notifications, you want iOS builds, if you're on Windows, you have to go to App Center. Now you can also do that for WPF and WinForms apps, so which is pretty sweet. So what is it in .NET Core 3.0 for Windows desktop apps? Again, it's deployment flexibility. It is a modern .NET runtime running on Windows 10. So the question is, like, should you, if you're building a WPF or a Windows desktop application today, should you jump onto this? And the answer is yes or no, because if you are caring about any of the newer APIs, if you have a need to have multiple .NETs or multiple versions of the app running side by side, then yes. But again, if you are happy with .NET Framework, you don't have a reason to. So again, choose what is right for you and your enterprise. We are here to support you. So we had talked about this last release. We just couldn't officially come out and say we support it because Microsoft wasn't ready yet. But now that .NET Core 3 is out, we can officially say that all of Telerik UI for WPF and WinForms, it works beautifully on top of .NET Core 3. So again, there is nothing stopping you from modernizing any of your desktop applications. So let's take a quick look at some of the WPF and WinForms stuff that we put into this release. So let's start with WPF. This is the flavor of XAML that kind of got it all started, and then there is UWP, then there is Xamarin Forms, but WPF is arguably the richest XAML, and the dev experience is really nice. And we want to kind of ride that wave. So with .NET Core 3, what you also have is design time support. So what you want is a toolbox. So you can drag and drop your items, and we have full support for that. So you can bring in all of the Telerik UI for WPF, the .NET Core 3 version of it, add it to a toolbox, and then you can drag and drop. But it's not just the drag and drop part of it. It's those other little things, like you have a little smart tag. So when you drop a grid, you can edit things about the grid on the fly. You have a properties window. When you select something, you can edit all of the properties about that UI component. So all of that is very welcome for desktop developers, and we want to support all of it with Telerik UI for WPF. Moving on, you're going to love this. So in case you're building the next Visual Studio in WPF, I recommend you maybe not try, but again, there are lots of uses. Maybe you want to build like a coding dojo where you want to have somebody else write some code in your app. Right? Mm-hmm. So we built a syntax editor, and it's not just for coding, it's for anything that you want to highlight or have autocomplete on. So this is almost like Visual Studio, except done in a WPF app. So we can support all of the popular programming languages, and yes, you can do JavaScript in a WPF app, but you can also do custom things. And so the support is for all of the things that you do expect from a rich code editor, things like code completion, undo, redo, find and replace, be able to zoom in, localization and all of that. But you can also customize. Maybe use just a language that only your enterprise uses. Or your users tend to write something that is very specific. You want to give them some formatting help. You can define your own language and define how the highlighting and the autocomplete works.
I'm sure there's uses in the insurance industry and medical industry where you've got certain types of documentation you have to write.
Exactly.
And that needs to be linted.
Yep, exactly. So this is linting and code editing in a WPF app, and we did that all with a new control. It's called the syntax editor. There's a file path picker. We did some file dialogues, and again, we keep pushing on these things because when you're on a desktop, you have access to the whole file system. The user might care to bring things in. So this is a new file path picker. You can pick up file, and again, all of these UI, it's completely styled according to your theme. So it'll change the look and feel of it based on what theme you're using. You can use the file dialogues, or you can let the user just type it in. It's just a way to get to a file path or a directory rather quickly. We did a toggle switch coming from like the mobile world, and just to kind of modernize things, you can see that little one-way or the round-way tickets. It's a little toggle switch, but again, it works. And this being WPF, we can do multiple things with it. It has multiple states, and we can write converters. So like when you switch the state, we can toggle things elsewhere in the UI. So it's just a modern toggle switch. It's highly customizable, has all the APIs that you expect. So. One more thing that we did was webcam control. This was something we actually did in WPF last release, and then we did it for WinForms, which we'll talk about this release. But the WPF one keeps on getting more love. So this is a modern WebForms webcam, and it can take in inputs from a built-in camera or a USB camera. It lets you stream and record a video, record an audio file, and then have the ability to save it off. We did a whole bunch of things with audio encoding, so we can record audio nicely, and the API is fine-tuned, so you can move things around the UI elements. The settings as to how the webcam looks like, everything is very nicely controlled, and when the meeting maybe starts or stops, you get notifications as to what's coming in from the feed. So
what would be fun here is to tie it to like Azure Machine Learning or something like that, and you can pull in video and analyze it and use it to turn on your sprinklers when cats walk in your yard.
There we go. So again, I mean, desktop applications can be so much smarter because we have all of the UI now that can look into your hardware, look into you, and be aware of what's going on, and then you get to write anything else that supports the business logic for your app. There's a brand new theme. Again, both of us run VS 2019. We like it, and it's just a clean, modern, fresh look. So we built a theme that supports Visual Studio 2019 look and feel in a WPF app. So just another theme to add on to probably a gazillion themes that we already had, which is great. A few more goodies. If you're exporting things out of a grid to a PDF or an Excel, we give you some features, especially if you're showing like grouped or hierarchical data. It might be nice to be able to see it on the UI, but when you export it, you want that exported out as a flat list. So now it's a toggle whether you want that grouped or flat. We have a thing called the virtualizing wrap panel. We have this virtualization thing on multiple controls because essentially what it is it's a UI that is careful as to how it renders itself. So if you bind a wrap panel to 100,000 records, we don't want to slow down your application because it's trying to churn and render all 100,000 records. This is based on how you scroll, and it's virtualized, so it kind of goes off and bites little pieces that it can do to keep things performant. So the virtualizing wrap panel now has a grouping, and it's more fine-tuned for performance. There is a rich text box, so users can type in whatever formatted text that you want, and that has a few additional things. When you paste content in, you can paste that as plain text or formatted, or merge the formatting or keep the source formatting. So we added a few more things into it. Again, it's enhanced user experience, just a better option for users to be able to have those customizations when they bring in any content. So let's take a quick look at WinForms, and then I'll show you some of these things kind of in action. So this is kind of in tune of all of the other desktop applications that you're building. This is WinForms. Again, our WinForms suite is possibly the largest and the most, I guess WebForms and WinForms are the most mature ones because we have been doing this for so many years. This one also gets a webcam. So again, you can do a WinForms application which has an embedded web camera. We can pull in the feed from whatever camera that you have installed. And the same things. It can capture images, it can stream, and it can record videos. You can save it off. The settings panels are very customizable. And again, you get a lot of APIs to control things. There's a new Sparkline control. This is, oops, sorry. The Sparkline controls are very nice to show trend of things over time. And this can be a static thing, or if you connect it to a data source that is constantly changing, like a stock market, it'll actually show it to you rendering as the data comes in. So it's meant to be lightweight and performant, and it has all of the data binding things that you are used to. Lots and lots of different types of series that you can support, bar charts, line charts, scatter charts, and you can also print. Yeah.
These are super useful for dashboards.
Yes, very,
make
very
some
useful.
really nice stuff with those.
Absolutely. Okay, so more things. There is a whole concept of breadcrumb, and we first encountered this when we did the file paths and the file dialogs last release. But it looks like the breadcrumb thing is really useful to kind of see where you are in your file system. So it still works with the tree view, because that's how you kind of go, you drill down into a tree, and then you know exactly where you are at. But we also separated it out as a standalone component, so you can use it in things that are not a tree view. But again, the same idea, as you type, it shows you autocomplete. It has a history of the things that you have seen. So it's just a modern breadcrumb control that works not just for the tree view, but other controls as well.
So this isn't necessarily something that's tied to a file system. It could be your own custom data source.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of show you, or you can kind of go into your favorites and be able to point, or let the user point where he or she wants to find things. So no, it doesn't need to be a file system. It could be anything. It's just a breadcrumb of where you are in the process of doing things.
Very nice.
Yeah. The file dialog, this is kind of where you kind of do use the breadcrumb quite a bit. So we do drag and drop support. If you are typing things in the address bar or the directory that you are in, we can give you some autocomplete, and you can kind of pin your favorites. So it's kind of like what Windows does with your file system, but you can do this for your users. Just give them more control, because again, it's a desktop application, so users want to deal with files and things like that. Right, so let's kind of wrap up a couple of more things, and then I want to show you some of these things in action. So this is the rich text editor. WinForms and WPF have the same thing. Same idea. If you are bringing in some content, we want to give you some options as to how you can paste it. So customization options. You can maintain the source formatting. You can merge, or you can just plain text do the paste. So I think that's all I had with WinForms and WPF. Let's take a quick look, and I'm going to pull up Ed's favorite operating system here and see how fast we roll.
Blazor? Oh wait, that's not an operating system.
Well, the browser is starting to be an operating system almost. It's a VM.
Yes, very much so with WebAssembly.
Yep. Come on, Windows.
So we had some questions around the Xamarin photo editor.
Yep.
And a couple of people were asking, can we add things to the image? Text, graphics, emojis, you name it.
I'll have to check. I mean, yes, those are things people do. I'll have to check if we have APIs to add on things.
Okay.
We have APIs to crop and adjust the image itself, but I'll have to go and check if we have APIs to add things to it.
I think we've opened a user forum post on that already in our feedback.telerik.com, so you can upvote to have that feature added.
Yep, please use the feedback. Okay, so I'm on Windows, so I can show you these two apps real quick. The nice thing is, if you are using, or if you're new to any of these things, go ahead and try these things out. It's just a sample app that you can download and install. You don't have to even install the bits. We show you the code that we use to render these things, so you get to try things out before you use it. So here's the syntax editor.
This is nice because the web, we have this native, place where we can go play with these things. On the desktop, not so much.
Yeah.
So we've built something so you can do that same experience.
Exactly. So this is a syntax editor. Essentially, it highlights and formats code the way you want. And here is Ed's favorite JavaScript formatted nicely in a WPF app, because why not? And you can do other things, like this one here is XML. This is C#-ish. So you can define exactly what the language definitions are, and it'll do all of those things. And this is also open to styling and maintaining the theme. So if I go and do this Visual Studio 2019 theme, it's just a little cleaner, more blue. So the syntax editor is here for you to use in your WPF apps however you want.
You were missing a semicolon in that JavaScript file, by the way.
Okay, so file path, again, you see like these little pop-ups that come up. These are floating things, and again, you can style and you can theme them however you want. But this is just pure WPF. There is no Windows that's throwing this up. So we can customize these things. You can also type it in, and it has autocomplete as you go. Here's our toggle switch. This is, again, as simple as it gets. But notice how when I do the round trip versus one way, the return date, we can hide it, and we can do it as simple as just a XAML converter. And we can do it purely in XAML without any code. So it's really, really simple.
So what's the .NET Core story here?
For
WPF, does that work with .NET Core?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So again, it's up to you. You can have your WPF apps running purely on .NET Framework, as it has been running for years now, or you can just do you can do file new project on .NET Core. There are some brand new templates that Microsoft gives you, and then we throw in Telerik templates as well. So you can have a modern .NET Core 3 WPF app with all of our UI in it.
So we've got .NET Core 3.0 support. WinForms as well, right?
Yep, and WPF, yep. So here's the webcam view. Just going to show you one quick thing here. So if you look at it, it's starting up my camera here, and there's me, and there's Ed. So what is nice here is all of these settings, right? And you can customize this. All of these things are APIs. So the brightness, the contrast, the hue, sharpness, you can control all of it. Camera control like zoom, focus, tilt, aperture, pan, you can do all of it, right? So all of these things are either up to the user to do, or it's up to you to programmatically do. And the nice thing about this app and also the WinForms app is you can click on this code part of it, and it's going to show you the code that we use to render that. So there's the Telerik RAD webcam. That's the component that's using the webcam and plugging into your devices and showing you that view. Okay, so you can stream, you can record all of these videos, and it's really nice. So I'm running a little short on time, so let me quickly show you WinForms, and then we're going to switch back gears. So that's UWP. What I wanted to show you was WinForms. Okay, there you go. So WinForms, again, it has the new webcam, which we looked at. It's going to be similar, but take a look at the Sparkline. This one is showing you the Sparkline that is actually tied to data. Oops, I brought it up twice now. So this is live feed of a data source that's updating in real time. So that's why it's so nice. And you can do, you can kind of go all in with these Sparklines. I think we have a demo where it shows you like a gallery of all the different things that you can do, and you can render these charts based on whatever data source that you have, and it's just very, very fast. So here you have Sparklines for all of your WinForms applications. Okay. Again, like I said, try out the code. Again, it's all there. You can download it when you say, give me a free trial, and then you can also play around and just download the demo app and see how it's working. Okay, so with that, let me come back and talk about some of the other things. So there's obviously UWP. This is, again, open source. We have like 2,000 plus controls that are meant for all of UWP controls. And again, I mean, UWP is interesting, and there are things we can do with it, especially on the UNO platform. So again, we are looking actively. But all of this is free and open source for you to use. Let's talk about some of the other pieces. Reporting, which is again a very important part of building line of business and enterprise apps. So the big news is both reporting and report server are doing something that we have been asked for a long, long time. So it turns out we have report designers. So this is where you as a developer, you want to provide your users with reports, like your CFOs, but they may also want to customize the reports themselves. Right? So we have always given out designers that work within Visual Studio, and we also have a standalone report designer. So it's a modern, full-fledged, feature-rich design report, like a report designer, which lets you drag and drop things, tie into any data source that you might have. But we have never actually had it for the web. This is the first time we are actually reviewing or releasing a preview version of this. It's still obviously not feature rich or at par with the Visual Studio or the standalone report designer, but you can do this on the web now. So your users can just go to your web application and be able to design the report however he or she wants, right? And that's pretty cool. You will be able to edit report definitions. It's a WYSIWYG design surface. So you will have your report UI elements onto one side. You can drag and drop. You can select, you can move, you can resize, you can use any data source that you want. And it's just a very flexible, nice way of doing this on the web, because the report viewers are for everything. It's not just for desktop. It could be for web, could be for mobile, but for you to be able to design a report on the web, that's kind of new. We also worked on a few more things, like when you actually render a report, there are things that go with it, like the parameters that go into your report, or there is a document map that shows you how to navigate into different parts of the report. We have made things a little more flexible, so you can put the parameters onto the left, right, top, bottom, same with the document map, so it's just really a flexible way for users to be able to interact with your reports. And we worked a lot on the optimization of the data sources that we use, so we are caching things as much as we can. We're sharing the UI as much as we can as well, so everything is very performance tuned and optimized for your reports. And everything that reporting gets, report server gets as well, so this is your opportunity to be able to store and serve up reports from your report server. It's an ASP.NET application, but it gives you a lot of things out of the box, like the optimizations on how you cache your reports, and it obviously also gets the web-based report designer. Same idea, WYSIWYG design surface, but again, your users will now be able to schedule reports delivered to them, be able to design reports to her or his own needs, and then be able to schedule reports to go out to them at certain intervals of time, or whenever like a trigger happens in terms of whatever else that's happening data-wise. So again, all of this is out there for you to use from Telerik Report Server. Let's talk for the last 5 minutes about some of the other things that make developers productive, things that are not in particular like tied to a framework, but they're really helpful. So Fiddler. We've always had a huge code base and people, or user base of Fiddler users, and Fiddler is there for you to use as a web debugging proxy to be able to record things and capture HTTPS traffic to be able to muck with it. So Fiddler has come a long way, and the Fiddler release actually happens a little off release from the DevCraft releases. That's actually coming out this week. So Fiddler Core is just a Fiddler engine separated out, so you can embed that in your own dashboard. And Fiddler, we are kind of rethinking how we make it work. So there's this concept of Fiddler everywhere. We have redone the UI. Actually, it is using Electron. So you can actually have Fiddler running. If I get a quick second, I'll show you. So you can have Fiddler running on a Mac and on Linux as well. So that's pretty cool. More things, JustMock. This is your mocking framework. It is a very lightweight, fast way of mocking things that you want to write unit tests for. Anytime you're going to a database, anytime you're going to a service, you want to be able to mock that, so you can write unit tests, and this has come a long way. Some of the new things we did was last release we had integrations with Azure DevOps, which is the whole way of building CI/CD workflows fairly easily. So you can do all of that. We added new support for being able to mock non-generic things like classes and generics, and again, full support for .NET Core 3 if you're building WPF or WinForms applications that run on .NET Core 3, as well as ASP.NET Core 3. Right, so you can use JustMock in just about every application that you can build with our stuff. Other workflows, things that we are considering, things that are on our radars. So we talked about a little bit of document processing. You showed it off, and I showed it off from a Xamarin application. So this is big, because this is what enterprises use day in and day out, different types of formats, and all of this is a single .NET standard library. Eventually it will be, and then you can integrate that so you can generate these things on the server as well as on any client app, web, desktop, or mobile. So we are putting in a lot of effort behind the document processing libraries to make things work.
Something a lot of people ask for.
Yeah.
So we're focused on that, and I think we'll be rolling it out pretty soon for .NET Core.
Yep. All right. We also have Test Studio, which is, again, very popular for developers to be able to automate testing, and also for your QA teams maybe. So we have full support for VS 2019. We have guides that are embedded inside of your app. So just a lot of love that we continue to put in. We don't get to talk about these things a whole lot, but again, these are all meant for developer workflows and kind of optimizing how quickly we can work. We are keeping an eye out for other technologies like AR, VR labs. We have things that we are working with enterprises. Again, lots of applications of AR, VR within enterprises. HoloLens 2 is coming out. So again, all of that exciting stuff.
It's the future.
Yeah, and Oculus just came out with a new headset as well. We're also doing Unite UX, which is our pitch to kind of bridge the developer designer mindset gap and have something that you can quickly prototype and be able to generate code that is Angular or React, and that's something your developers can run with very quickly. So lots of things we are considering, lots of new frameworks. So as is the norm, I mean, we try to look ahead at the future, do the things that we think are upcoming that can help the developers, but also be able to modernize things that are existing and solidifying the base that we stand on, making sure bugs are getting fixed, making sure we are looking at feature requests, and just overall making sure all of the controls that we do are feature rich to a point that developers can just drop in our UI and be able to ship apps quicker. So at this point, we are probably a minute out. So any questions we can answer, Ed?
Our team has done a fantastic job of answering a lot of these questions for us.
And again, I mean, thank you for asking questions. Like I said, there is a little army that helps us answer questions. And if you have put your questions out on Twitter, both of us will jump off this webinar, and then we'll chime in and we'll get to answer your questions as well.
There are some people asking when some of these things are going to be available.
Which ones?
Just in general, everything that we've shown today is available in your...
Yes.
your
everything that you see that's part of Telerik DevCraft, so all of the Xamarin stuff, all of the ASP.NET, WPF, WinForms, everything is out there. You can just get the hot bits and you will see those things light up. Some of the other things that I talked about, AR, VR, Fiddler enhancements, and then Unite UX, those are all things that are on our radar. We are actively working on those things. Some of them may land this year, some of them are slated for next year, but these are things we are aggressively looking at to move the needle.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of WebForms users in the audience today, which is nice. They're asking questions about how to work with some of the components that we've just added. So it's nice to see that people are still building a lot of WebForms applications, and that's why we continue to support.
WebForms is incredibly productive.
The WebForms,
right?
yeah.
It's just so quick to be able to build something. Yeah, but and again, I mean, modern WebForms applications don't need to be like the WebForms of 10 years back. It can be AJAXified. It can have all of the modern UI components. All right, so Ed, I don't think we want to keep people for too long. We're already past a minute over the hour. So this is one of the slides that Microsoft uses that I always throw in, because just look at the ammunition we have as software developers to build stuff, be it for WebAssembly, be it for mobile, be it for all things web and desktop. We have all the things that we need to build amazing things. So let's go ahead and do that and change the world one app at a time. So that's it from us this time. I want to thank you again for spending an hour and a half with us. I know some of it we go over quickly because we're trying to cover a lot, but you can reach us anytime offline, and reach us or reach the PMs or reach anybody else who you know is from Telerik. We are always willing to have a conversation. We are always willing to do the things that are right for developers to be more productive.
I think we had a really great release, lots of new stuff for everybody to go try out and add to their applications.
Absolutely. So, it's always important to close out the year strong and just put in all we have into a release.
Yeah, demos.telerik.com. You can find all those things that got lit up recently in your control panels to install it all.
Absolutely. Demos.telerik.com, docs.telerik.com, and feedback if you need to tell us anything. So again, that's it from us. Hopefully we will see you first thing next year. So from all of us, thank you. If you are using Telerik and Kendo UI bits, we appreciate every bit of it. And if you're new to the family, welcome on board, and hopefully we're able to show you all the cool things that we work on, that we are passionate about. But that's it from us, and thank you so much.
Next week is the Kendo UI webinar,
Absolutely.
so if you want to come back for that, that'll be next week. Go to telerik.com/webinars and sign up.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, folks. We'll see you next time.